Hey guys, and welcome to Quality Shot. I'm really excited to be joined once again by Nikhil Uttmachandani. Let's call you a cricket journalist, commentator, and an analyst as well. How are you doing?
How are you doing, man? Great to be back here on your show, Quality Shot, of course. Fantastic page, great content, and it's a pleasure to be on.
No worries. A pleasure's all mine. Pleasure's all mine. Guys, as well, please do check out Nikhil on Instagram and also his YouTube page as well. I know he's got a YouTube page as well and channel. And he just did an interview with Tymor Mills and Chris Jordan. So really, really good interview. Go and check it out. It's fantastic. Okay, we're going to talk about the ODI series between West Indies and Sri Lanka. First of all, you must be really happy. A clean sweep. Were you impressed and happy with the result?
Overjoyed, to be honest. Fantastic result by the West Indies again. I think it was a victory which had great improvement in terms of one-day international cricket for the West Indies in recent time. And I think, a lot to look forward to in terms of going forward in one-day cricket to take from this series, and very impressed.
Yeah, I agree. It was really impressive. It's funny because last time we talked, I remember, we were talking about it, and I think we both agreed that maybe the ODI format was probably West Indies' weakest format. But it almost seems like after this series, potentially this could be the start of, the West Indies forming a strong core and a competitive ODI team going forward. Would you agree?
For sure. I think definitely, as you said, the one-day international format has been one of the weaker areas in West Indies cricket in recent time. But the fact that, we saw great improvement, things like guys being able to get hundreds consistently, build partnerships, and then even with the ball at times, be able to bowl through the middle overs. I thought these were all areas where they were lacking in the past. So to see them do this in this series, I think it was refreshing as a West Indian fan. And as you said, I think it's the way up for the West Indies from here.
Yeah, 100%. Did you feel that maybe the Super 50 had something to play, a part to play in that as well, as in people were coming out of that fresh from 50 over cricket, and it was like a good, I guess, it was good practice really going into that series?
Massively. You take, for example, Darren Bravo, scored a bulk of the runs in the Super 50 in similar conditions. I found that allowed, most of the players to get in nick and really gain some form ahead of that series. And I think it helped so many of them to be able to perform in that series in similar conditions, get a feeling of what it was. And then probably just when they face a level up in terms of opposition, when you face in an international side like Sri Lanka, I think there was only small differences you had to make in terms of, making the transition.
Yeah, agreed. And it looks like that opening pair of Hope and Lewis at the top end, look, they built ridiculously good platforms throughout all three ODIs. And I think that really set up the games for West Indies, for me personally. And we'll go into Shai Hope in a bit. But that opening pair, do you think that's the pair that they're going to go with going forward now? They look like they are a good combination together and they kind of complement each other well.
I think it has to be honest, because, these guys have been consistently performing in the past. And we are going to speak about Shai Hope, but I think the two of them complement each other really well. You saw in that first ODI, usually it's Evan Lewis being the aggressor. He wasn't really in nick fully, and we saw Shai Hope be the one, not ready to be the aggressor, but to pick up the slack. And it allows them, whoever, is the one really doing the bulk of the scoring, it allows the other person to anchor. Usually that is Shai Hope, but there are times where Shai Hope shows his flexibility and shows what he can do in terms of when Evan Lewis is, rotating at a slower rate than usual. So definitely the two of them, a big reason why the West Indies were victorious in this series. I thought the most effective thing they were able to do was see off the spin threat, which we know going into the series was a big concern. They faced the bulk of the overs from the spinners and only kept them to 3 wickets, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, 100%. I think we know that Sri Lanka's main threat, as you said, is their spinners. But I guess touching upon Shai Hope, you mentioned that he seems to, I don't know, you can probably tell me better, but I feel like he's come back into the team. It looks like he's got different gears to his game. Before, he'd be striking at maybe like a 70, 75 strike rate, but he has different gears where he can go up and down. Like he hit a few sixes in some of the innings as well, which I thought I don't really associate six hitting with Shai Hope, right? But he was hitting it cleanly and he looked like he was someone who wasn't rushing, but he was rotating the strike well and actually wanted to score at a quicker rate. And I think at one point in the first ODI, he was about 40 off 27 deliveries, which is almost like a T20 score, right? And I was thinking, oh my God, and he was outscoring Alvin Lewis, as you said, who Alvin Lewis obviously was in the T20 side. So, Shai Hope is coming here in the ODI side. So you would expect it to be the other way around. Let me ask you a question actually on this then. Shai Hope, do you think on current form, and what he averages, I think it's nearly 54 in ODIs, and he's got 5 consecutive 50 plus scores now in ODIs. Do you think he's a top 3 ODI batsman in the world on current form?
But that's a big question, to be honest. But if I'm saying on current form, based on, not a lot of cricket being played around the world, I think he has to be. However, if you look at overall, not really top 3, but definitely in the top 5 or in the top 10, because I think he was ranked 12th in the rankings before this series. Obviously, he's going to go up, break into that top 10. But surely, I mean, if he can continue down this line, there aren't many, you look at Virat Kohli, Steve Smith, Babar Azam, Owen Morgan, these guys, they do very well in terms of one-day international cricket. But definitely the way Shai Hope's been performing at a consistent basis, series after series, away and at home, I think he's definitely in the conversation for one of the best to do it in this format.
Yeah, 100%. And when he's in full flow, I mean, I did a few watch-alongs, and I watched all of his innings, to be fair, in the series, in the ODI series, and live, and I just thought he's so good to watch. He's one of the best, for me personally, in terms of a player that I'd like to see when he's in nick. He's definitely my top 5 players to just watch. He just looks effortless the way, he times the ball. Everything just looks, picture perfect, really. And when he hits sixes, he's got that six-hitting ability now, which he didn't have before. And even then, it's not slogs. We're talking about proper shots here. So he just looks like someone who's got all the shots in the game. And really, the only way that he's going to get himself, the only way he's going to get out is by getting himself out, really. And that's the type of talent I feel like he is. Have you seen an improvement, do you think, after having that break coming back in? Do you see a slight tweak in his game?
Well, to be honest, it's hard to say, a big improvement after he averaged close to 80 in the last series against Sri Lanka. I mean, he's been in ODI cricket, he's been consistently performing, series after series. However, what I will say, and you alluded to it earlier, the maturity in his game, I've seen slightly in terms of his strike rate. We know that his average strike rate is just above 74, just hovering around 75. In this series, he was able to strike at 82. And I touched on it before. The fact that he was able to consistently rotate the strike, even when Evan Lewis was struggling a bit in that first one international, to me, it showed great coming of age in terms of his game and great maturity, to be honest. So I think, a lot of positives to take from Shai Hope's performance in this series. And I think, although it's hard to really top what he's doing, he's going to continue to grow as a player because he's just that good and just loves the game that much.
Yeah, 100%. He just seems like he just seems to love the game. And I talked to Hayden Walsh Jr. actually the other day, and he was saying to me that when he faces Shai Hope in the nets, it's almost like you just don't know you're going to get him out at times because he just is so focused and he's got everything. There's not really a set weakness that he has. You talked about rotation of strike, actually, which kind of leads me quite nicely onto Darren Bravo. So Darren Bravo scored 100 in that third ODI, which is, again, it was an impressive 100. I mean, I think when anyone scores 100, it's pretty difficult to be critical. He's someone who strikes me as, in the past, he's kind of struck me as someone who's maybe batted in an old-fashioned way and maybe hasn't quite developed as the game has developed of cricket, scoring at a quicker rate, etc. Maybe rotating the strike more than you would usually. He scored his first 100, I think it's since 2016 it was. So obviously has struggled at times in the ODI, but now back in some type of form. Do you still feel though, for me, I think he was striking at around 70 or just below in that 100. Do you still feel like the rotational strike is something you can work on? Because again, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he's got the six-hitting ability. He can hit boundaries pretty effortlessly, but he tends to get tied down at times when there aren't those loose deliveries, and he will just play out a maiden in an ODI rather than try and look at, okay, how can I open up my wrists and just work it into a gap for a single and twos? Whereas someone like Shai Hope has that already, I think. And I feel like that's the difference between the two players. What do you think?
Spot on, to be honest. I think in that last ODI where he got the 100, it was clear. I mean, I think more than 50% of his deliveries were dot balls. So the fact that he was able to make up for it and it shows his six hitting and boundary hitting ability. I definitely think that's a massive part where he needs to improve his game in terms of the rotational strike. However, where I do give him immense credit is in a period like that through the middle stages where it was getting really difficult and he was not able to score. He didn't just play a rash shot and give it away, trying to risk it to risk it for the biscuit and sort of get his team a boundary. He stuck it out, and I thought that was so fantastic to see from him because for him to be able to carry on and get 100, I think is so important. Yes, a lot of people were critical of his inability to rotate the strike, but to come back like that and stick it out and make sure you're there to the end and get that 100, I think it's even more valuable. So we may look back on the dot balls, but when you look at the grand scheme of his innings, I think the more fact that he got 100 was even, more important to the team's chances of winning.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely he has that resilience, doesn't he? For sure, Darren Bravo. And I remember when he was first coming up, he was seen as like the next big thing. I mean, there's comparisons between him and Brian Lara because Brian Lara was his idol and he had that really high backswing and he's kind of tweaked his technique a little bit as well. I'm just hoping that for me, as you said, I think the rotational strike, if he can just improve that part of his game, he will be and potentially will fulfill the potential that I think people saw at the start. I think, and everyone will say that he's probably underperformed given the talent that he has. And that's probably saying how much of a talent this guy has, that he's got a lot more to give, I think, for sure. Do you think that the same as well? Do you think he's got a lot more to give? I mean, he's 29, 30, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. I think he's a very talented player from a long time. It's just probably, it was a bit unfortunate when he had his problems with the board and spent about 3 years away from the game in terms of West Indies cricket. But I do think what we've seen, for example, double hundreds in Test cricket away from home in New Zealand. And I mean, he's been a class player from the time he was born into West Indies cricket. So I'm definitely thinking, the sky's the limit, especially in the one-day format. In the Test format, now he's under a bit of pressure, but knowing the player he is, I'm sure he'll be looking to rebound in a big way. So definitely one for the future in terms of he's very experienced already, being 32 years old, but definitely he can give a lot to this team in both formats. He excelled at the one-day format in, for example, the Super 50, and now has carried over the form into the 50-over series. But I'm now hoping that he can do well in the Test series as well.
And talking the Super 50, so I think Jason Mohammed was the top run scorer, wasn't he, in there? But he actually performed better with the ball. Was that a bit of a surprise? I mean, the highest wicket taker, someone who's seen as more of a part-time spinner, had that famous celebration that he was doing a lot as well, where he was getting carried around the field a lot. What did you think of him? I mean, was that a bit of a surprise to see him bowl so well and get so many wickets?
I thought it was, to be honest, because many people going into the series would have expected him to be sort of a part-time option. But I think Kieron Pollard used him sparingly and used him really well. And what he showed was that, he had the ability to bowl and take wickets, create pressure as well. His economy rate was something that stood out to me. But the fact that he was able to take the most wickets in the series, it changes the narrative probably of how we look at Jason Mohammed, more from being a batsman who can bowl as to then now a full all-rounder. So he'll probably be a bit unhappy with his runs tally in the series. But the fact that he was able to take 6 wickets shows him, grasping his opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think of obviously Kieron Pollard's now the captain in both formats, T20s and ODIs even, so he's the white ball captain. What have you thought about his captaincy as a whole? Have you been impressed?
I thought he's been superb, if I'm being honest. He's one of the main reasons why the West Indies have been able to win a couple of series now. Ireland, the one-day international series there, then this big one against Sri Lanka. We won one-day international in India against them. So I definitely would say he's definitely brought some major improvement in terms of his captaincy. I think he's very I think he's very strategic and tactful. So definitely, he will be, a big part of the West Indies' chances, for example, in that 2023 World Cup and going forward in one-day international cricket. And I think he does well. He always wants to win, and that's something that really makes him stand out from other captains.
Yeah, he definitely seems tactically astute, I think, as you're saying, you're alluding to. He definitely does. And he's got a lot of experience. And obviously, he's a winner, right? I mean, he's won not just with West Indies, like the T20 World Cup a couple of years back, but, franchise tournaments as well. So he's definitely someone who has that winning mentality. I think it definitely is seeping through into the rest of the West Indies side. And it seems like, before, you guys were having kind of some players coming in, some players not, some players unavailable because of whatever issues with the board or whatever else it might be. But it seems like now pretty much you've got that core that's needed or you guys want, which is quite good. And talking about, I guess, going forward then, one player I think that a lot of people were saying and would like to see or are hoping will come back into the fold at some point is Shimron Hetmyer, who scored 100 in the final of the Super 50, but was on the losing side of it. I know he's had issues with like his fitness, and also I think there has been cited some kind of potential attitude issues as well. What's your kind of thoughts on the whole situation? I mean, he's a very talented player, but I drew this comparison. I don't know what you think of this. And I said to some of my subscribers that I really hope he doesn't become like Umar Akmal was for Pakistan. So Umar Akmal obviously broke onto the scene for Pakistan at the age of 19, similar to Hetmyer, performed really well, looked this incredibly talented player, and is kind of not, now his whole career is petered out because he just hasn't really given his all to the game. And I was saying, I hope the same doesn't happen with Hetmyer. What's your view on the whole situation?
I think he's one of the most talented players, if not the most, in the Caribbean. Has a lot to offer the West Indies in all three formats. One of the few players that I think excels at all three formats. In terms of his fitness, that's something that definitely needs to improve. I agree with Cricket West Indies to not select him if he's not fit. And I really hope it'll act as a wake-up call for him so that we can get, him back into the fray. Because I think, for example, in the one-day international series and the T20 series, especially, his batting at 3 would add so much into that team. Sort of, he could be the one that plays that sort of stabilizer role, which I think is vital in the team, especially in the T20 format. So I definitely think, he's not done, nowhere close. One that's so talented in West Indies cricket, and I'm really hoping he can come back strong, if not later this year. Well, yeah, it's later this year, really, for these next upcoming series that we have at home.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, he's a phenomenal talent. I think him and Nicholas Pooran, for me, like when I look at it from the outside in, I feel like they're the two most talented players in terms of ability-wise. I just really hope they fulfill their potential. And that's why, I don't know why, but with Hetmyer, him and Umar Akmal, I just draw comparisons with them. I'm just hoping that his career doesn't follow that same trajectory. I'm sure it won't. I'm sure you guys will be more lucky with it. But yeah, fingers crossed he gets back into it. Just to touch on Sri Lanka then, I mean, really, I would say the biggest positives for them, and really the only positives, was Hasaranga with the bat and ball. I mean, he looked really good at it. I think he scored the highest score from a Sri Lankan in an ODI at 8. I think was that 80 odd. He didn't pick up many wickets, I think, just because the West Indies batsman after the T20 series realised that he's probably the main threat. If we can just play him out, then we don't need to worry too much because we'll get loose deliveries from the other bowlers who are not as skilled. What's your take as a West Indies fan and just from the outside as a fan? How good is Hasaranga, do you think?
I think he's like world class, to be honest. I mean, the fact that he could come in these conditions and did what he did in the T20 series, I think it was outstanding. I think you're spot on in terms of what the West Indies strategy would have been to him. I think it was more just make sure that you keep him out the game and not get wickets. But he's shown that he has the batting ability to always be in the game as well. So one of probably going forward, the better all-rounders in world cricket in terms of the white ball format. And I think at this World Cup in India later in the year, it could be a real period where he breaks through sort of and helps Sri Lanka a lot in that World Cup. So I think he's a quality player and I'm very excited to see what he can do in the future.
Yeah, agreed. And I guess the other two players for me was Bandara, who was making his debut, I think, in the T20s and ODIs, and he was batting, I think, at 5 or 6. He looked like a pretty good finisher for them. And the other one was Gunatilaka, who is a bit more experienced at the top, was second highest run scorer in the series, and seems to have improved his bowling as well. Were you impressed by him as well?
Yeah, I think both those guys. Bandara obviously making his debut in this series. I like his fluidity in terms of his batting, and then even his fielding as well. One of the more outstanding fielders that I've seen in quite a while. And then for Gunatilaka, at the top of the order, he's explosive, and I think that's very important for Sri Lanka to have in both formats. And then his bowling, as you mentioned, a big asset to them in terms of spin-friendly conditions. So definitely for Sri Lanka, they are rebuilding around a young core, but to see guys like Nisanka, Bandara, Gunatilaka all these guys, I think, is crucial for them going forward in terms of rebuilding for the prep for the future. Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. And talking of Gunnar Tilaka, what are your thoughts on the obstruction whole scenario?
I think, it's an interesting one. I had my own views on it. Probably that at first glance, I could have understood where Karen Pollard was coming from, in terms of, running for that ball and probably not seeing, in heat of the moment, you think, you want to appeal, etc. But I could understand where people are coming from when they say that, it was distasteful. But at the end of the day, my take on it was that it was the umpire's decision to make. Nonetheless, though, I think that's, sweep that under the rug, because we saw Karen Pollard apologize to Gunnar Tilaka as well. So I think all of that is good. It's all over now. And yeah, I guess just it was an interesting talking point throughout the series, but I'm glad, that it's over now.
Yeah, I think it was a very big move, I think, from Karen Pollard to go up and apologize as well, I think. And he probably looked at the replay and realized, I think as you said, in the heat of the moment, he probably thought, or maybe he has. And also, I think at the time, West Indies were desperate for a wicket in that situation, I think, as well. So sometimes that just boils over. But yeah, I agree with you as well. The umpire was just a poor call by the umpire, really. You can appeal, and bowlers will appeal all the time for deliveries that they don't think are out at times. But, it's up to the umpire, isn't it? So I think, the umpire and third umpire probably will look back on that and think we shouldn't do that again. But yeah, not a huge talking point. I just wanted to get your views on it, because I thought it was quite an interesting one. Obviously, people were talking about it quite a bit after, but swept under the rug, as he said, after Pollard apologised. What do you think in terms of for Sri Lanka then, as someone who's a neutral to Sri Lanka, what do you think they need to improve on in the ODI format? Obviously, they have this young core, as you're saying, but can you see like very visible holes that they need to plug?
I think personally, I would just say, they need to play some more cricket together. Obviously, new core, new group coming together. A lot of names missing as well. Their two main scorers in the last series at home, in Kusal Mendes and Avishka Fernando, weren't there either. So I think it's probably just about playing some more cricket together as a group. And as they keep playing, they'll continue to grow in terms of consistency and performance, really. But probably I would say the top order would be disappointed that they were not able to kick on and build partnerships. And that's something where I thought the West Indies did well. Whereas Sri Lanka was more of the lower order, the Hasaranga, Bandara, and these guys picking up the slack for the top order and trying to get them a good score. But if you saw that top order, two guys get close to 100 or a big 100, you would have seen them get scores closer to 300 as opposed to more 230 and 270.
And what do you think of Amindu Mendes, the ambidextrous bowler? Well, that's quite interesting. Left arm, I think he only played the first ODI, and he bowled right arm off spin and then left arm off spin. And at one point, I had to double take in the middle of the over because I was like, "Is this a different bowler?" I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure it's the same one." And I thought I was seeing things. But what do you think?
I think it's impressive to see him that, and I think that he's just an example of the quality that Sri Lanka can produce, man. I mean, guys that can do everything. So I thought it was fantastic to see, and I'm sure he'll be looking forward to playing cricket in the future.
Yeah, 100%. It's amazing to see. It shows the development of the game, and I guess they're trying to get advantages any way you can, which is great. If I had to press you then for the best batsman of the series, who would you pick? I think it's probably an obvious one, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to go against Shai Hope, man. 258 runs it was, average of 86. I don't think you can give that to anyone else.
Yeah, and bowler of the series?
Well, obviously the obvious choice is Jason Mohammed, but I was also very impressed with Akil Hossain. I think this is now his second one in international series. We saw him in Bangladesh take 4 wickets. He's taken 4 here now. And I think the fact that the West Indies have such a young spinning talent, and he clearly has the ability to bowl. We've seen the carom ball as well. So I definitely think he's one for the future in terms of the one-day format, especially. And I'm very excited to see where he can go going forward. And I was very happy with his performance in this series.
Yeah, 100%. I'm a massive fan of him after watching him against Bangladesh. I thought he was really impressive. So looking forward to seeing more of him. And maybe, I guess, your biggest surprise maybe in the tournament as a player, someone who maybe overperformed, someone that you thought did better than you were expecting.
I would say probably maybe Jason Mohammed with the ball, as we said earlier, because I never expect him to take the most wickets in the series. So I would definitely say him. And let me see if I could think of one more. because I think I really expected all from the West Indies point of view in terms of the batting to pull their weight and do well. All in the top. It was mainly the top order that stepped up in every game. But yeah, I would probably just go with Jason Mohammed for his bowling efforts, taking 6 wickets.
Okay, cool. Is there anything you want to touch upon before we wrap up?
Yeah, just thanks once again for having me. You guys could all follow me, at Nick Uttam, Nikuttam on all platforms, and stay tuned to Quality Shot as well, man. Fantastic content coming from Faizan.
Thank you very much, Nick. I really appreciate it. Yeah, guys, I'm actually releasing Hayden Walsh Jr. interview that I did the other day in a couple of days' time. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I think you'll probably enjoy that, Nikhil, as well.
I'll tune in.
Perfect. Thanks very much, mate. Really appreciate it.